everyone, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who don't know, I'm Bia, and Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens come together with other teens to learn about spiritist topics that is easier to understand than just reading straight from the book by yourself or listening to an adult lecture. Sometimes breaking it up and putting it into our own words and into our own lives makes more sense to us. Last week we finished off chapter 2 of part 2 of the Spirit's book, where we were talking about the soul as in the spirit incarnated in the body. This week we're going to move on to chapter 3, and chapter 3 is talking about its titled is The Return from Corporeal to the Spirit Life. So we're going to talk, instead of talking about the soul incarnated on earth or wherever, we're going to be talking about we're talking about the spirit in the spirit world. And if you guys do happen to miss a show here or there, because I understand we have really busy lives, so if you happen to miss one, it's good to go back and listen to it because the book makes chronological sense, so the information before you kind of need to understand what comes later, so it's good to be caught up and in order. So again, this chapter is titled The Return from the Corporeal to the Spirit Life, and the part within the chapter that we're going to start off with is called The Soul After Death. So question 149. What does the soul become at death? And the spirits answered, it becomes a spirit again, i.e., it returns to the world of spirits that is left for a time. So last week, again, we talked about how the soul is when the spirit is incarnated in a body on earth. So what does the soul become after death? It just becomes a regular spirit again, because it's just in the spirit world, and it returns to the world of spirits that it left for a time. So that's an important phrasing, because it's not going to the spirit world, it's returning, because that's like our main home, and then we came here for a little bit of time, but now we're returning, and then in the next incarnation we'll come here for a little bit of time, and then we return to the spirit world. So that's the main world. That's an important way that they worded it. So question 150. Does the soul preserve its individuality after death? The spirits answered, yes, it never loses it. What would the soul be if it did not preserve its individuality? So here the question is saying, after death, does the soul preserve individuality? So, like on earth, we all have our favorite foods, we all have our favorite colors, we all have stuff that makes us different, that makes us unique, that make us individuals. We're not all the same, we don't all look the same, we don't all think the same. So this individuality that we think differently, we look a little bit differently, stuff that separates us, does that still continue or does it go away? And it says that we never lose it, and it's what would the soul be if it did not preserve its individuality? So if we all just suddenly became totally the same, then what would be the point? We would all do the same exact thing, no one have any questions, there wouldn't be any. So we do preserve that individuality. That's what makes us us. And there's a question that goes along with that right after that says, how does the soul preserve its individuality if it no longer has a material body? So this question, it's saying that something that separates us, that makes us individuals, is what we look like. So our hair. Everyone has a different type of hair, so that makes us unique. That makes us that's part of our individuality. So if you don't have a material body, how does it keep that? And the spirits answered, it still has fluid proper to it, which it draws from its planet, which retains the appearance of its last incarnation, the perispirit. So what they're saying here is that the perispirit kind of keeps your shape, so of your last incarnation. So if you were a tall male, you had short hair, your perispirit kind of keeps that same form. You're not going to turn into a woman when you go into your body isn't going to look like the body of a woman when you first go back. You're still going to retain that appearance from your last life. So if you are short and you're a girl and you have curly hair, you're still going to have that kind of appearance from your last life. But then 3 lives ago, we're not going to have that appearance anymore. We're just going to have the appearance of our last life, our last incarnation. And then there's another part of the question that says, doesn't the soul take anything else from this world? And the spirits answered, nothing more than its memories and the desire to go to a better world. These memories are full of sweetness or bitterness, depending on how the soul has lived its earthly life. The purer it is, the more it will comprehend the fulfillity of what is left behind on earth. So this is saying that the only real thing that we take back to the spirit world from this world is we take just memories and desires to go to a better world. We want to improve. We're like, okay, now that we went through all of that, let's get better. That's the only thing that we take. We don't take like our cat, we don't take our favorite book, we don't take material stuff. We just take our memories of what we had, of what we did. And our memories, depending on how we lived our life, they're rather really sweet or they're really bitter. Maybe we're like, oh my god, it was so terrible, nothing went right. Or maybe we got some good stuff accomplished and we'll kind of be happy, but it's all just the memories of what happened. Question 151. What about the opinion that the soul returns to the universe, to the universal whole after death? So this question is saying, it's kind of asking, some people think that the soul, that we go back to a whole. So say it's a little drop of water. We're all little drops of water. And then we're gonna just, when we die, we're gonna go back into the ocean and we're just gonna be one huge blob again. So it's saying, is it like that? What do you think about that opinion? And the spirits answered, don't all the spirits taken together make up a whole? When you are in a group, you are an integral part of it, and yet you still retain your own individuality. So they're saying that we're not gonna all combine into one, but just being the part that we're all groups. Like in school, if you're in a group of people, you're still your own person, but you're now in a group, you're in a class. But that class is still part of the whole school. So we are in a group, and we are a part of that group, but we all still have our own individuality. We're all still different. We didn't just mesh all together. Question 152. What evidence is there for the soul's individuality after death? The spirits answered, don't you have such evidence through the communications you receive? If you were not blind, you would see. If you were not deaf, you would hear. Because frequently a voice speaks to you and reveals to you the existence of a being outside yourselves. So here the question was basically, what's the evidence that we all have individuality after death? And they said, isn't the communications that we're receiving, the ones that the spirits are telling us stuff, when people over time have communicated with spirits, there's always different identities behind all of them. So isn't that already proof? Isn't that this person is one person, this spirit comes and says they're one person, that spirit comes and they say they're another person, they have different characteristics, they have different tones of voice. So there's still individuality right there that we can comprehend. Not exactly see, but comprehend. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment, and he says, those who think the soul returns to the universal whole at death are wrong if they mean that it loses its individuality like a drop of water falling into the ocean. Nevertheless, they are right if by universal whole they mean the entire assemblage of incorporeal beings, of which each soul or spirit is a member. So here again, he's saying what we were saying before about how it's wrong because we're not going to turn into a whole blob. We're not going to be little drops of water, and then just go into the ocean, and then you can't see which drop is which. But if you see a whole as there's a group of people, and each person is still different, but we're all a group. Or say you have a pizza. Each slice makes up the whole pizza, but each slice is different. So we still have our individuality, even though we're part of a bigger group. And then Allan Kardec continues with his comment, and he says, if souls were melded together into the universal whole, they would possess only the qualities of the whole, and nothing would distinguish them from one another. They would have no intelligence or qualities of their own. However, in all their communications with us, they have revealed a consciousness of the self and a distinct will. The infinite diversity they display under all aspects of evidence of their individualization. If there were nothing after death except what is called the great whole, absorbing all individualities, the whole would have to be homogeneous, and the communications received from the invisible world would therefore all have to be identical. It is observed that we are dealing with distinct beings, for we met good and evil, knowledgeable and ignorant, happy and downcast beings of all natures, joyful and sad, frivolous and serious, etc. Individuality becomes even more obvious when these beings prove their identities through unmistakable signs and verify personable details related to their earthly lives. Furthermore, there can be no doubt about such individuality when they manifest their apparitions. The individuality of the soul has been taught theoretically as an article of faith, but Spiritism makes it obvious, and to a certain extent, material. So here, he kind of summed up what we were saying before about how that if we all went together into one blob, we would all be saying the same thing. We would all the spirits that have been communicated to throughout all of history, they would all just be saying the same exact thing because they're just one blob and they all think the same thing. And so we wouldn't have differences. We wouldn't have spirits communicating with us, some who are happy, some who are sad, some who know a lot, some who don't, some who joke around a lot, and some who are very serious. So if we didn't have individuality, then there wouldn't be all these different communications. We'd just be receiving the same message in the same monotone voice from all the spirits. So that's already proof to us, and for Spiritism, it's very obvious proof because we know that connection with the spirits, and we can see that when other religions and other people can't. Question 153. In what sense should we understand the eternal life? And the spirits answered, only the life of the spirit is eternal. The life of the body is transitorial or temporary. When the body dies, the soul returns to eternal life. So here they're saying that eternal life is the life of the spirit. The spirit is going to live eternally, live forever. But the life of the body, that's temporary. The body is going to die, and then it's not going to be alive anymore. But the spirit is what's eternal. And then there's there's a 153b, and it says, wouldn't it be more correct to understand the eternal life as that of pure spirits who no longer undergo trials because they have finally attained perfection? And the spirits answered, that indeed represents eternal happiness, but it is all a matter of words. You may call things whatever you want, as long as you understand the words you use. So here they're saying that wouldn't eternal life be for the pure spirits who have reached perfection and they're morally perfect now and intellectually perfect and they don't have to go any trials? Wouldn't it be eternal life for them? And they said that it could represent eternal happiness because right now we don't have eternal happiness because we're still undergoing trials and atonements. But we could see it as eternal happiness when you get to be a pure spirit. But they said over here that as long as you understand the use of the word, that the word is forever. That's forever and ever. That's the important part. Then it doesn't matter really what you're referring to. And now we're moving on to the next section in this chapter, which is called The Separation of the Soul from the Body. Question 154. Is the separation of the soul from the body a painful process? And the spirits answered, no. Frequently, the body suffers more during life than at the moment of death. The soul itself feels nothing at death. The suffering that is sometimes experienced at the moment of death is pleasure for the spirit, for it sees that the end of its exile is at hand. So here it's saying that frequently the body suffers more during life than at death, because a lot of people when they're dying, sometimes they're just too old and they die peacefully, so they're not exactly suffering, and it's not even painful for the body itself. So sometimes during life is more painful than at death. But even for those who have a harsh death and it's painful for the body, it's not painful to the spirit. For the spirit doesn't feel anything, and they're kind of relieved to kind of be done with this step in their life and go back to the spirit world and start improving themselves again some more. So it's not painful for the spirit. And then Allan Kardec put his own comment in, and he says, in a natural death that results from the depletion of organic vitality due to age, humans depart from life without even realizing it, like a light goes out for lack of energy. So that's what we were saying, that some people, you just die because of old age, and it's not even painful to the body, let alone painful to the spirit. But even when it is painful to the body, it's not to the spirit. Now, question 155. How does the separation of the soul from the body occur? The spirits answered, once the bond that held the soul are ruptured, it disentangles itself. So in very basic terms, that the separation from the soul and the body is kind of the bonds that were holding it together. They kind of just rip apart, and then once they start ripping apart, the soul, the spirit, can just kind of disentangle it. And then there's a sub-question, and it says, does this separation occur instantly and through an abrupt transition? Is there a well-defined dividing line between life and death? The spirits answered, no, the soul liberates itself gradually. It does not escape like a captive bird that is suddenly free. These two states touch and blend with each other. This way, the spirit disengages itself little by little from its bonds. They unravel, they do not break. So, here, I thought it was a great explanation that they say that they unravel, they don't break. So, if you have a bunch of strings and you're kind of knotted and it's all these knots, you don't just get a scissor and cut them all off. You don't cut through all the knots and then they're broken free. You take the slow process to untangle it, like when a necklace has a knot in it and you stay there forever trying to pick at it and untangle it. So each knot gets untangled, and that's how it's freed. You don't just get a scissor and quickly cut through all the knots and then that's over. So it's a slow process of unraveling each one. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment, and he says, the spirit is connected to the body during life by its semi-material envelope, or perispirit. Death is the destruction of the body, but not of the perispiritual envelope, which separates from the body when organic life ceases. Observations have shown that at the moment of death, the spirit's departure does not occur suddenly. It occurs gradually, and may vary in speed according to the individual. For some, it is very quick indeed, and in such case, one can say that the moment of death is also that of liberation, which actually happens soon afterwards. However, for others, especially those whose life have been materialistic and sensual, the separation takes much longer, sometimes lasting for days, weeks, and even months. This does not imply that there is any vitality remaining in the body or any possibility that it might return to life. It only means that an affinity persists between the body and the spirit, an affinity that always depends on the importance of the spirit that gives to matter during life. It is logical to believe that the more spirit has identified with matter, the more it will suffer upon separating from it. On the other hand, intellectual and moral activity and elevated thoughts initiate the separation even during corporeal life, and when death finally occurs, the separation is almost instantaneous. All this is the result of studies involving individuals at the moment of death, and demonstrates that the affinity that persists between the soul and the body is some individuals can be extremely painful. The spirit may even experience the horror of decomposition. Such a case is exceptional and peculiar to certain kinds of deaths, suicide, for example. So that was a long section, so let's break that up a bit. And so what they're saying in the beginning here is that death is the destruction of the body, but not the perispirit, not the envelope that's attaching the spirit and the body. So we're not, when the body dies, it doesn't automatically cut the envelope in half. The paraspirit doesn't cut him in half and the spirit's set loose. But something very interesting that they're saying is that something that decides how long it's going to be to untangle all those little knots that we were saying is the attachment to material things, the materialism in people. So some people who are very attached to material things, some people who have so much money and that's all they care about, and they've never really loved someone, they've never felt moral qualities, they've never felt, they can just see money and money buys this, and it's like that saying that money can't buy happiness, but for some people that's all they know, so they're really attached to the material world, and they're like refusing to let go, so it can take them a really long time to untangle those knots because they don't want to let go to the material world because they don't think that anything's going to be after. So they're holding on really tight. But for some spirits who, when you intellectually learn, when you morally learn, when you have these good thoughts, even it says during your corporeal life, even not even after death, but even at life, maybe you're already started to untie some of those knots. Not that your spirit's trying to like run away and untangle the knots, but if there's maybe 500 knots, your spirit starts unknotting them, starts unknotting one, starts unknotting another. So you're not attached so much to the material, and that you come to the sense that, okay, I'm gonna go on to something else after this, that this isn't the end. And for those people, when death does come, it's a lot easier for them to just finish untangling some knots and they move on. They're not desperately grabbing on to material things and trying to hold on. But just because that it said that it may take months for them to finish untying all these knots, it doesn't mean that there's any chance that the body will come back to life. And that's really important to understand, because we don't want to keep bodies around for months now trying to think, oh, maybe they'll come back. They won't come back. It's just taking the time for the spirit to finally untangle all those knots. So the important part is learning now and having that moral and intellectual activity now and elevated thoughts, and that's going to help us, the separation be so much easier. And it said it could be instant, it could be really fast for those, not because they're like trying to run away really quick, but just because they've come to terms that they know there's something more for them. But also it says that for some it can be extremely painful because the spirit wasn't really ready. It wasn't ready for that to happen. Like they were saying in cases of suicide, that's something that's obviously very painful for the body, and for the spirit it wasn't their time. They didn't have any time to start untangling any knots, and that's a really horrific kind of case. But the important thing for us to keep in mind right now is to try and be moral and be intellectual and have that intellectual activity and have elevated thoughts, because it'll make it so much smoother and easier for us. And to understand that material things are just now. If we think about the material things we have right now, everything that we have in our room, in our house, it's not going to last us 10 years. Some things maybe books will, or maybe everything's going to be electronic, so not even books will. So all that we have, it's not even going to last us 10 or 20 years. So we can't be so attached to it, thinking that that's it. So that's where we'll leave off today. But before we go, of course, I want to read our daily message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations for today's date, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. And this one, hence the day, is titled Love. Who, being loved, is poor? The Beatles saying that money can't buy us love. It's true. Love is its own sort of wealth, more precious than any material wealth. And if we were to sit down and really tally this wealth, we might be surprised of how well off we are. The love of a spouse or a partner, of family members and friends, these accounts can quickly add up. One thing we have to remember, though, love is like friendship. We can't expect to receive it unless we're willing to give it in kind. I will say I love you at least once a day, and I'll mean it. So I hope you guys have a great Valentine's Day and a great rest of the week, and we'll see you all back here next week. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.